Ladies and gentlemen, we will start now. We will start with a presentation from Vijay Lakshmi. She is right now Divisional Commissioner Patna, but she has worked in various departments, including Agriculture Department. She will be discussing about some she did in Agriculture Department.
Sri Saibal Gupta, all of the participants and dignitaries of the IGC conference. Today I am making a very small presentation on what we did in Department of Agriculture 2 years back. This is bringing green revolution to Eastern India, Bihar success story. Just to give a brief background about the innovation, in Bihar, various crops are grown, as we all know, and I'm just giving you a rough idea of which crop is grown in how many lakh hectares in the state. Rice is grown in 35 lakh hectares, wheat is grown in 24 lakh hectares, maize 6.5 lakh hectares, pulses 6.1 lakh hectares, and oilseeds 1.4 lakh hectares, vegetables in another 4.98 lakh hectares, and fruits in 3.07 lakh hectares. What is the background of this innovation? We all know that rice is the staple food, not only in the state but also in the entire country. And in this state, in Bihar, rice is cultivated in about 60% of the net cultivated area. That is, the net cultivated area is 56 lakh hectares. And there's a problem here. We have an extremely low level of rice productivity, which is 1.5 metric tons per hectare, which is a very disappointing phenomena, which of course has a pervasive effect on food security and farmers' incomes. So the key here is to increase the rice productivity and rice production for food security and also for securing good income for the farmers. So these four are the critical interventions which we focused upon during 2011 and 2012. These four critical interventions were green manuring, hybrid rice, SRA technique, and stress-tolerant usage of stress-tolerant varieties of paddy. What is the objective? The objective is to increase rice productivity by promoting sustainable farming technologies. And the requirements to achieve that objective were timely supply of quality inputs, women's empowerment and making them change agents, skill development of farmers by organizing quality training and live demonstrations. Very strict monitoring was resorted to at various levels, and involvement of the entire agriculture machinery, district administration officials, and also including people's representatives in the whole campaign. These were the basic strategies which were adopted. We thought that at least 10% of the total crop area of paddy has to be tried with SRA technique. So it was almost 10% of the area, so it comes to, in terms of acres, it comes to 8.75 lakh acres. And for the hybrid rice cultivation, we thought that at least 10%, again 10%, because in all these areas, we thought that let us try at least in 10% of the total area. So for hybrid rice cultivation, we took almost 10 lakh acres, and for the green manuring program, it was almost 9.25 lakh acres. And all these programs were converged with the SRA program. What is SRA? Most of you might have heard about this, and 2 years back, it was all over there in the newspapers, and it was very widely covered in the media, both electronic and print media, even in the country and also in abroad also. SRA is system of rice intensification. What does that mean? It means that it is a technique, basically it is a technique whereby the paddy transplantation is done in a different method, which is different from the conventional paddy transplantation method. So in this method, what we do, we basically treat the seed before transplantation and transplant 8 to 12 day old single seedling. That is very important. I'll show you some of the pictures. Pictures speak 1,000 words, so I need not actually elaborate all these points. I'll show you the pictures. See, this is the green manure crop. This is called as Dhencha, Sesbena is the botanical term. Dhencha is the local language. So green manure, what does it do? It actually increases the soil fertility and soil health. So we thought that let us reduce the use of chemical fertilizers and rather increase the use of green fertilizers or green manure crops. So we have actually encouraged farmers to adopt the green manure crops. Once the crop is grown, it looks like this. After the crop is grown, what the farmers do, they actually mulch the entire crop into the field, into the paddy field. That was demonstrating the seed treatment in one of our programs. In fact, it's very interesting to tell you this story that Honorable MLA, she was actually practicing SRA earlier in the Gaya district, and due to her involvement in the whole campaign, the ex-chief minister has in fact asked her if she is willing to contest an election, and she agreed, and she won the election, and she became the MLA later on. So this is the kind of impact the SRA had on women, and the SRA campaign in fact has used women extensively as the change agents, bringing change in the mindsets of the farmers to actually shift to SRA technology. This is also one of the programs where we used women farmers as resource persons in different SRA trainings. And the very important feature of this entire campaign was involvement of everybody, starting from the government officials related to the agriculture ministry and district administration officials, not only them, but all the panchayat representatives, MLAs, ministers. So the ministers in charge of each district were also very enthusiastically participating in the whole campaign. And we made it a point to invite all the MLAs and the district in charge ministers to come to these block level and district level shivirs, Krishi Utsav shivirs, to actually distribute the SRA kits. So this was one of those pictures where the Honorable MLA was distributing SRA kits in one of the Krishi Utsav shivir. And this is the community nursery. We have actually encouraged farmers to go for community nursery. So farmers, they pool in their resources, and the resources given by the government, they pooled in those resources and formed these community nurseries. This is one of the pictures of the community nursery. And this is the SRA nursery bed. Once the nursery is grown, these paddy seedlings are taken out like this, and they are transplanted. This is one of the training of the transplanters. We call it as Ropenhaar Prasikshan or transplanter training. So there were a lot of trainings, very extensive training was given to the farmers, including women farmers. This is one of those training programs. You can see women farmers showing their paddy seedlings. Actually, this is the trick. SRA is different from the traditional method of cultivation in the fact that you actually sow a single paddy seedling. Unlike the conventional method where people generally tend to sow 2-3 seedlings together, in SRA we sow only one single seedling. And another important feature of SRA is that the seedlings have to be sown in a line form, and 25 centimeters into 25 centimeters, row to row and line to line distance. That distance has to be marked. So that is the technique. So we have actually extensively trained all our farmers and the extension workers in this particular training. This is called as line sowing. And another important feature of SRA is using Conoweeder. Here this farmer is actually using a Conoweeder. What does it do? The Conoweeder is a simple implement which actually, which is used in between the rows of the paddy, and it actually, generates, it actually generates a kind of air for the plants to breathe. So due to which the root system of the plant gets very strong. So that is the basic difference. And using Conovida, after the paddy reaches that kind of a stage, that kind of a growth stage, is very important. It's very pivotal to the entire program. So we have actually encouraged farmers to buy Conovidas in the Krishi Utsav Shivers and use it extensively in the program. Here, a woman farmer is using the Conovida. So the salient features of the initiative, as I already mentioned, is extensive demonstration of the SRA technique, cultivation of hybrid rice variety. This was ensured in almost 10 lakh acres. And Dhencha, which is Sesbena, cultivation in 9.25 lakh acres, and massive training program for farmers and extension workers. In agriculture, timeliness is very, very important. If I can quote Pandit Nehru, he used to say, anything can wait, but not agriculture. So agriculture cannot just wait for anybody. You cannot just ignore the cycle, the crop cycle. If you have to sow a particular seedling at a particular time, you have to do it. If you just skip that, or if you just miss that particular period, you cannot sow that particular crop. So every crop has its own crop cycle. So timeliness is very important. So we have actually meticulously planned the timelines. The program was launched by the Honorable ex-Chief Minister on 27 January 2011, and divisional level trainings were held between 4th to 9th April 2011, district level trainings 18th to 26th April, block level trainings 19th May to 10th June. Why I'm showing you all this is that we very strictly adhered to the timelines and followed these programs very meticulously from the state level to the panchayat level and to the village level. These are the strategies adopted in the innovation: time-bound action plan, extension worker skill development trainings, farmers skill development training, block level camps for input distribution, disbursement of program support instantaneously in cash during the aforesaid Krishi Utsav Shivers, and on-farm advisories by the KVK scientists and also agriculture university scientists. Monitoring was very, very important for this whole campaign. Unless you monitor very strictly at various levels, this entire success would not have been come true. So what we did was that we have actually prepared guidelines, detailed guidelines with clear-cut roles and responsibilities for different stakeholders at different levels. And convergence of activities was a very important thing, and the convergence of not only these 3-4 programs, but also the resources in terms of scientific resources, in terms of KVK scientists, agriculture university, Jivika, and also WDC resource persons. Experienced farmers, especially women farmers, were used as resource persons and also as change agents. Timely identification of beneficiaries was ensured through 10,000 subject matter specialists and Kisan Salahkars. Timely pre-positioning of inputs at block level was the key to the whole program. These were some of the inspections. And just look at the crop productivity. If you see from 2006-07 to 2012-13, there is a jump. You can see there's a jump at 2011-12 stage. The crop productivity for rice has increased from 11% to 24%. And 2012-13, we could sustain the momentum. So it shows that these innovations are not a one-time phenomena, but we could actually replicate this in 2012-13. This is the comparative productivity of wheat, rice, and pulses. In fact, in wheat and rice, you can see there's an increase, a tremendous increase in 2011-12. So the production of rice in 2011-12 went up to 81.01 lakh metric tons from a meager 29.55 lakh metric tons in 2010-11. If you actually see the data, the highest so far in history of Bihar before this innovation was during 2008-9, which was 55.9 lakh metric tons. That was the highest so far. And in 2011-12, due to all these efforts, it could actually risen up to 81.01, and we could actually sustain this in 2012-13. I'm actually very happy about 2012-13 because this was a rainfall deficit year. 2011-12, the rainfall was very good, but 2012-13, there was a lot of deficit in rainfall. Still, we could sustain this kind of momentum and we could achieve more than what we have achieved in 2011-12. I feel very proud of it and very happy about it. And if you see in terms of the changeover the previous year, and just notice at serial number 5, 2011-12, the output after the initiative had jumped 161% in terms of production and 129% in terms of productivity. Again, the same graph, productivity in quintals per hectare. This was the bumper crop in one of the fields. These were the crop cutting experiments, and extensive crop cutting experiments were resorted to. Almost 55,000 crop cutting experiments were done to see whether the kind of output which we were getting is correct or not. So that was also done on a massive scale. Never in the history of Bihar that kind of extensive crop cutting experiments were resorted to. And this was the happy moment. A farmer from the Nalanda village, Nalanda district, Darbeshpura village, he had produced a record. In fact, it was a world record, 224 quintals per hectare production. Honorable ex-CM was honoring him. What was the innovativeness of the whole initiative? SRI, as I said earlier, it is a distinct method from the traditional rice culture, and this distinctiveness was early recognized and implemented with all its essential elements. Supply of quality input in time and cash subsidy payment on such a large scale was resorted to for the first time. Convergence of all programs such as RKVY, National Food Security Mission, Macro Mode, and implementation of all these programs as one program was its unique feature. What was actually, these programs were there earlier also, they are running now also. What was the uniqueness of this initiative during that time was that earlier there were too many programs running parallelly, and there was a lot of confusion in the minds of the extension workers that how to actually make an account of all these programs, and who would be the beneficiaries, how do you actually account for the money. There was a lot of, even at the extension level, while disseminating knowledge about these programs, there was a lot of confusion in the minds of the extension workers and also in the minds of the farmers. So we told the extension workers that you just forget about the names, whether it is RKVY, NFSM or Krishi Roadmap, you just forget about the names. You only concentrate on the methodology, that is SRI, and do according to the guidelines given to you. So this was actually, we have simplified the procedures, and convergence of all these programs also resulted into good outcomes. This was a very important outcome, in fact. Women empowerment. Women were in fact the harbingers of the whole campaign. They were the change agents, and they were actually in the forefront bringing about change in the farmers' mindsets, and also we used them as resource persons for imparting training to the farmers. So women were actually there in the forefront. When we used them as resource persons, the whole village was actually listening to them. So that actually kind of inculcated a lot of self-esteem in women, and their status in the whole village has actually gone up. So this actually, an indirect outcome of this whole thing was women empowerment also. And replicability is a very important issue. We could actually, this was not a one-time kind of an innovation. We could actually replicate all these activities in the next year, the subsequent year, which was a rainfall deficit year, and could achieve more than what we have achieved in 2011-12. Yeah, this is obviously the effect. Highest ever rice production, 81 lakh metric tons, and the Government of India has awarded Krishi Karman Award for Best State in Rice for the year 2011-12. And of course, a world record with highest ever rice production of 224 quintals per hectare was achieved by a farmer, Mr. Sumant Kumar from Nalanda district, Darbeshpura. And not only this, in the subsequent year, 2012-13, we got another Krishi Karman Award for wheat cultivation, for the best state in wheat. So we have actually adopted the same methodology, even though we don't call it as SRI, System of Rice Intensification in Wheat, but we actually adopted the same methodology, line sowing and zero tillage and a lot of other methods which are actually needed for improving the wheat productivity. So subsequently, in fact, we have got 2 awards, not just 1 award, but 2 awards. So these are the outcomes of the initiative: improvement in delivery time of services, improved access of information and better beneficiary feedback, improvement in measurable indicators and simplified procedures. Of course, the initiative was very well sustainable. And the, what is, how it was before and after the initiative. This is very important. Once we do some innovation, we always measure it in terms of before and after the initiative. So in terms of interventions, the mode of implementation before the initiative was small and scattered. After the initiative, it was a massive campaign. And training of farmers was limited and knowledge-based before the initiative. It was time-bound, purposeful and skill-based after the initiative. Women participation was very limited. Women were seen as change agents after the initiative. Input supply used to be delayed before, and timely availability of inputs to farmers after. Convergence of programs, small and too many programs with same components had limited impact on farmers. Massive one program led to discernible impact. SRA coverage was limited to only very small area, 5,000 hectares, and we actually resorted to a very big, large area, 3.34 lakh hectares in demonstration. But altogether, the non-demonstration area was another 7 lakh. So altogether, it was 10 lakh hectares and 10 lakh acres. Sorry, hybrid rice coverage was very much limited earlier, and this time it was spread over 4 lakh hectares. Green manure usage was none before the initiative and after the initiative. In fact, the impact of Dencha was actually studied by the agricultural scientists from the Agriculture University, and they came up with this kind of a data that the biomass added in the soil was 74 lakh metric tons, nitrogen added to the soil was 25,690 metric tons, and urea saved due to this initiative of green manuring was 55,747 metric tons. And use of vermicompost used to be very limited earlier, and use of vermicompost was very large scale. Use of chemical fertilizer, you can just see the chemical fertilizer. Earlier we used to put 178 kg per hectare. Now it has come down to 155 kg per hectare. Transparency was very limited at most during this campaign. Krishi Utsav Shivers only for information sake. During the initiative, it was both for information and input supply. Purchase of inputs, earlier departmental officers used to do, but purchase of inputs were done by farmers themselves in the Krishi Utsav Shivers. Crop cutting, nil to very limited. 52,235 crop cutting experiments were performed during the initiative. Rice production, of course, went up. Rice productivity went up. Paddy procurement also went up. Earlier, it used to be 12.35 lakh metric tons, but during the initiative, it was 22.87 lakh metric tons during 2011-12. Of course, I've shown this graph already. This is productivity. Just see, we always used to sulk that the Bihar's productivity used to be always very low when compared to the country, all India productivity. But in 2011-12, we have in fact, gone up. When the all India productivity was only 22, Bihar's productivity was 25. And this was the award which was given to us by the Honorable President of India. And it actually sums up the whole story. Department of Agriculture and Cooperation, Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India presents the Krishi Karman Award 2011-12 for best state in rice to the government of Bihar. While achieving record production and productivity of rice crop, Department of Agriculture, State Government of Bihar has made remarkable efforts in promotion of system of rice intensification, encouraging use of biofertilizers, vermicompost, green manure and farm mechanization, besides strengthening of extension delivery system, interdepartmental coordination through Constitution of Agriculture Cabinet, and organizing weekly video conferences with the district collectors for enhancing agriculture production in the state. So actually the award given by the Government of India sums it up all. This is the award. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Now we'll open it for discussion. If you have questions, I will add just few things. In Bihar, though SRI was not started in Bihar for the first time. It was done in other states earlier, but because of variety of reasons, could not get that popularity what we got here in Bihar. Because what happened here, they made SRI plus. It was not only SRI, it's not only intensification of rice. That method was there, but many more things were added. Like it was in a campaign mode, inputs were supplied, farmers were trained, equipments were provided. So all these things were put together and it was a package. And that's why it succeeded in a grand manner. But now, and it was now because the changing behavior of monsoon, now we are finding that we cannot grow rice in old method because we don't have plenty of water and the behavior of monsoon is erratic and we have less water to grow rice. So SRI is a very appropriate technology for method for growing rice. So that is one advantage. So in spite of last year's bad rain, the productivity did not go down. Though it affected many more things, but here the productivity really did not slip. Yes, any question? Yeah, please.
So that was a very impressive presentation. Thank you so much, and it's wonderful to see this. So I have one micro question and one macro question. So the micro question is, when we think in economics literature about barriers to adoption of new technology, one of the big ones usually is credit constraints, and input subsidies are recommended as an option to get farmers to adopt. The question is, after the initial cycle of providing the subsidy and the free inputs and the training, was the sustainability achieved even with the possibility of withdrawing the subsidy, or did you have to continue subsidizing the input? Because after you have learned once, you should then have the surplus return that you should be able to reinvest. So that is the micro question. The macro question is, if there has been so much improvement in rice productivity, why is the rice price inflation still pretty substantial? So is this because of the procurement regime, that the procurement is being done by FCI and under MSP, and then we've got this complicated process of FCI sits on the stocks and does not release on the open market? Because, I was just talking to a senior official in Finance Ministry in Government of India who was telling me that the reason they sit on all these stocks is because the revenue subsidy is booked only when they actually sell it. So when they're sitting on the stock, it doesn't actually hit their books, like a real loss. So the macro question is basically, if there has been so much increase in rice productivity, why is the rice prices, why the price is not coming down as much as one would expect? And I'm sure there are complex parts of that puzzle.
See, the input subsidies which were given during that time are still continuing. Yeah, it is there, but recently I don't know whether, in some sectors, especially mechanization, I heard that it has come down. The subsidies, the rate of subsidy has come down. But otherwise, the other inputs are still being given. For hybrid rice, whether it is hybrid rice, still the input subsidy is there, and also the SRI kits are being still given. And for your macro question, of course, it's a very complex web of, interdepartmental coordination, cooperation, and transportation of food grain, from one place to the other, and circulating the same food grain into the system, and procuring it first, and then circulating it into the system, and then in between there are so many layers of, traders, and, and ultimately if you are actually talking about the consumers, from the consumer's perspective that, we buy rice at 80 rupees a kg and 40 rupees a kg and also 20 rupees a kg. Of course, that is due to the varietal difference and, the quality of the rice. But otherwise, rice is available even at 20 rupees a kg in the market, if you talk about an ordinary variety.
Variety, because we have been doing this as part of our PDS project of calculating what the subsidy should be of market price minus the PDS price. And even in the 4 years that we have been working, even using the Ministry of Food price data from Patna and Bhagalpur, the two places where data is generated, we're actually seeing a pretty significant increase even in those prices. So clearly the production increase is not translating into price reduction the way it should. So maybe this is beyond your particular ministry, but maybe our colleagues from finance and others can shed some light on that question.
The micro question that you asked, we in the finance department also asked the same questions to them. But I think we are still not confident enough. We are still thinking we may slip down. So that's why, and we have acceded to agriculture department's concern that we concede that probably we have to continue. But of course we have to keep on, because it's not that majority of farmers have adopted it. We are suggesting that shift the farmers, the villages, new tolas, new farmers, so that it is widespread. That is what we are now, I think, concentrating on. Still not withdrawing the overall subsidy part. That, I think, is the first one. Second one again, because we are not yet surplus. Our productivity and production have increased, but the market is national, and we are still not surplus in that sense. So, and the macro picture depends on a lot of things, and on the difference of 50 paisa, the grain shift from here to Kanpur or from there to there. They are so smart. The government is not that smart. And also, I think there are a lot of factors. And in any case, we are not yet surplus.
And there is one more thing now. What we have done is from this year is a decentralized procurement. So now we have our own consumption. In our PDS system, we are not dependent. So whatever surplus we have in few pockets, that is being used in PDS. That is one. Input, of course, as Rameswar said, now for equipment, it has been reduced to 50%. That is one. And secondly, that shift of farmers and villages. Because we also want, because this can be demonstration. This cannot sustain, every farmer cannot be given demonstration and the whole package. So naturally, slowly you also adopt. That is the assumption. Thank you. Anybody?
Was similar reduction witnessed with regard to consumption of pesticide uses? One. And second, now that we are witnessing this trend of reduction in usage of chemical fertilizer, is it far-fetched to suggest that it is moving towards the organic direction, or organic rice production, or organic wheat production?
First of all, there was no intervention to reduce pesticide consumption. There was an intervention to reduce the consumption of chemical fertilizers through green manuring. That was point number one. The point number two is growing of organic rice. Even though it is resorted to in very small pockets, it's not possible to do it throughout the state or throughout the country. It is very, very difficult. The organic pesticides, even though people claim that they have come up with certain formulae, but still it is in a very primitive stage, and it has not actually taken up that kind of a scale to be able to apply to the fields at a larger scale. So the organic fertilizers are picking up very fast due to vermicomposting and green manuring and other things. But in the organic pesticide sector, we are still very primitive.
In fact, two things happened. One was, we are supporting biofertilizer. Like you are supporting dhaicha for green manure, and you will see huge use of vermicompost. A lot of support was given to farmers. That was one part. Secondly, one good thing happened that the price of chemical fertilizer went up many times. And it went beyond the reach of normal farmer. Almost the increase in price was 2.5-fold. Suppose it was selling for 500 rupees a bag, 1200 rupees a bag. So it went little out of reach of farmer. And then the support for green manuring and biofertilizer. Yeah, please.
Look, this bringing green revolution to eastern parts of India is a big program of government of India, and Bihar will definitely play a big role in making this program a success, because the difference of the productivity levels is in terms of, in case of Bihar, is very high. It is much to be achieved. And the major focus of this program is on hybrid varieties, and also the flood resistant varieties of seeds, particularly in terms of rice, and world over, particularly in Southeast Asia. This is the phase 2 of green revolution that the scientists are trying to achieve, to in fact to increase productivity in wetland, in wet areas. Bihar is supposed to be, in fact, water surplus states. We are known for floods, but of last 6 and 5 years, we have seen the frequency of droughts have increased. So innovations like these, like that, you don't have to fight flood, but you have to also fight drought. We have 22 districts, 38 districts, out of 38 districts have been declared drought affected in the last 3-4 years. So innovations like SRI is very useful. Still the contribution of SRI in total rice production is slow, but it's going to increase. But I'd like to add a point that few more innovations in program structure of bringing green revolution to Eastern India is required, particularly for Bihar. One intervention which is not there, which is very crucial, is rural energy. And so rural energy levels, particularly consumption of energy in agriculture in Bihar is too low. So how we are going to, in fact, increase the energy consumption, energy supply in farming areas would be a big challenge. Thank you very much.
And discuss matters.
Yes, solving my problem of time. Now we will move to Mr. B. Pradhan. He is right now Principal Secretary Food, and responsible for implementing Food for Security Act, the huge task he had. Before that he was in tourism and many other departments. He will speak on EPDS.
This one is.
Good afternoon, everybody. I won't take much time. I will confine my presentation to 5 to 7 minutes. And at the ground level, what we have been doing by applying information technology to bring reforms in the public distribution system. Food security has now taken center stage in policy discussions. Along with issues of food production, there are also clearly issues of access of the poor to food. In India, despite high GDP growth, over the past decade or so, the record in reducing hunger is not so impressive. This brings to the fore the question of inclusive growth, particularly inclusion of the most deprived sections of our society and regions of our country into benefiting from the growth process. Increased access to food comes forward as a basic component of inclusive growth. As a background, the Article 21 of the Constitution provides the right to life to all citizens, including the right to food. Article 47 of the Constitution provides that the state shall regard raising the level of nutrition and the standard of living of its people as one of its primary duties. To add to this, the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, to which India is a signatory, also cast responsibility on all state parties to recognize the right of everyone to adequate food. Eradicating extreme poverty and hunger is one of the goals under the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations. In pursuance of the constitutional obligations and obligations under the international conventions, providing food security has been focus of the government's planning and policy. Food security means availability of sufficient food grains to meet the domestic demand as well as access at the individual level to adequate quantities of food at the affordable prices. With this background, I will briefly mention about the National Food Security Act, and everybody present in this house is aware of all the provisions. Precisely in one slide, if I have to put it, it is the entitlement of 5 kilos, 2 kilos of wheat and 3 kilos of rice. And there is a special focus on nutritional support to women and children. And there is also provision for food security allowance. And the Act also talks about the reforms in the public distribution system. And it mentions about women empowerment. And it talks about the grievance redressal mechanism in terms of National Food Commission, State Food Commission, and District Public Grievance Officer at the district level. It also talks about transparency and accountability, and there is a provision for penalty if the public servant violates the provisions of the Act. What are the modus operandi? If I have to put in one slide about the entire Act, that there is a central pool maintained by the central government. The food grains are transported to each designated depot in each state as per the entitlement or as per the allocation. And there is intra-state allocation and delivery to the fair price shops by the state government. And at the cutting edge level, the local authorities are responsible for implementation and monitoring. What are the challenges? Again, if I have to put it in one slide, there are challenges relating to production, there are issues relating to procurement, and there are challenges relating to go down, storage, and at the cutting edge level, it is the public distribution system. There are issues of corruption, there are issues of pilferage, there are issues of accessibility of the deprived sections who do not have voice at the ground level. Briefly, I will touch about EPDS, what we have done at the ground level. And with me, my Deputy MD is there. He will take another 5 to 6 minutes. Precisely, if you have to tell, it is fully automated system. We issue the stock issue order by using information technology. There is automatic reconciliation of the amounts paid by the dealers into the banks. There is also real-time go-down inventory management through computerized processes. There is monitoring of food grain movement on a real-time basis. There is real-time tracking of the vehicle movement through dedicated control rooms in each district. There is also automated SMS alerts to the vigilance committee members and some of the beneficiaries. There is a dedicated help desk for redressal of technical issues. There is also a call center for redressal of grievances of all stakeholders. This is the GPS tracking. And in conclusion, if I have to throw some of the issues in this conference hall, precisely I have to mention food security is not limited to availability of food grains. And malnutrition is a multidimensional problem. Nutrition must be linked to health, education, and agricultural interventions. Thank you.
Honorable Chief Secretary, Government of Bihar, respected dignitaries on the dais and friends, good afternoon. Myself Sanjay Kumar, Additional Managing Director, Bihar State Food and Civil Supplies Corporation. Myself from ITS 97 batch and presently on deputation in Bihar government. As Principal Secretary Food has said all about the dimensions of the implementation issues in Bihar, I would like to limit myself on the implementations, what we have implemented in our Food Security Act chain. As National Food Security Act has been implemented in Bihar on 1st February 2014, but the central government has given its allotment in March. It has gone through all the preparations regarding the operational issues, and then the allotment was given. For National Food Security Act implementation, there were some key issues which was to be implemented before implementations of this act. So, by going through this, we have major three components: computerization of supply chain management, transparency portal, and grievance redressal mechanism. The workflow, as per previous traditions and norms, what we were taking, we have translated into the computerization chain, and it starts from the allotment given by the department, which we captures in the district-wise allocations mode. The district-wise allocations mode, when entered and approved by the competent authority, it goes to the district level, and the district supply officers gives in turn the block level allocations, which in turn is being fed and captured, so that it can be approved properly, and after freezing it, it goes to dealer wise. So up to this level, what we are saying, in a district level, we have captured the allocations, then in districts, the block wise allocations has been given, and in block level, marketing officer gives dealer wise allocations based upon the rations card, what one dealer has to cater about it. So the allocations given by marketing officers is being captured in this system. As soon as the allocations is being fed and freezed, each challan for the payment of the amount by the dealer is being freezed and generated here. Each challan is being generated by system, and generation of each challan is being SMS to the concerned dealer also, with the each challan number as well as the amount, so that the dealer can print out its each challan form from any of the cyber cafe or Vasudha Kendra, what the state government has implemented, from anywhere. The sample copy of this each challan is like this. So there is 3 copies in the one printout. One is for the bank, one is for the dealer, and one which can return to our district manager office, so that we can verify it that the district manager that the dealer has made the payment in the banks. And after verifying it from the bank transactions, a reconciliation process is taken there, which has been now automatized for the generations of a stock issue order, which is being called SIO. The system is like this. Every dealer payment has been being reconciled in the systems, and when the system has reconciled that each challan of the proper amount has been paid in the system and which has come to our district manager office, then the system generates SIO, stock issue order. Before generations, although has been generated in the systems, but until district manager approves it, it can't be generated, and no other persons can generate it. So it has the privilege of the district manager authority in their passwords. When district manager generates it, then it can be printed. Printing options is also there to avoid the duplicacy of this SIO, so that no defalcation should be there. After printing one time, certainly if due to some or other reason, if printing requires for the second or next time, some reasons has to be put into that, and district manager has to authorize it. This is the sample SIO which is being printed. This is being printed in 4 copies of different colors. So one is for the district manager office, one is for the AGM or assistant godown manager office, one is for the dealer, and the 4th one is on which the dealer acknowledges the receipt of these grains. So our chain starts by taking the food grains from the FCI godowns, then it comes to our SFC godowns in different block levels, and from the block levels what the doorstep delivery has been implemented, which is being dispatched to the dealer shop. Initially, dealer has to take these grains from the AGM level godown, but Bihar government has implemented doorstep delivery from this year, and now we are delivering the grains to the dealer shop. So, in capturing the FCI transactions to the SFC transactions, we are capturing the RT notes. Our electronic database is there, from which our RO, release order, is being purchased from the FCI, and this release order is being fed in these systems, and the transportations is being noted in the RT note, which is being captured here. As FCI has not implemented all these computation issues, so the RO is being purchased manually, and this RO is being captured in the systems. In doorstep delivery, the SIO is being, after generations and printing, it goes to the AGM password level. He there sees that which SIO has been generated and which dealer has to be delivered this godown, from the godown to the dealers. Then he captures all its details, how much rice, how much wheat, with which transport number and the driver's mobile number. When it starts, our GIS, as Mr. Secretary has said, the tracking of the transport vehicle starts. And the transportations ends, tracking of the transportation ends when the doorstep delivery has been delivered at the dealer shop. To ensure that the cycle gets completed, we are now going to implement this weighing scale, transportable weighing scale, which will go along with the vehicle, which will deliver after weighing the grains at the dealer shop. And this system, what we are seeing, it is enabled with GPS and GPRS. So at the time when it is delivering at the dealer shop, it will capture the latitude and longitude of the locations as well as time and volume of the grains. And when it prints, when the transaction is closed, it will print the slip just like our some shopping, when we take that print is there, or just like your credit card, which prints that this amount has to be paid and signed. So such type of slip is there, which shall be printed and signed there, and at the same time through GPRS, it will update the server directly without any any manual interventions so that the transactions get completed. And the tracking of this, as soon as the server gets the information that the dealer has been delivered the grains, the tracking of the transportation vehicle gets completed, and there is no need to more tracking the system, so that the transportation vehicle can go anywhere. The tracking starts with geofencing. In our systems, what we have taken, this is just like this. This is GPS based our transportation vehicles. So the grain which is lifting the grains, so the vehicles which lift the grain from FCI to SFC or SFC to dealer shop, it is all integrated with the GPS systems. So GPS systems starts when the entry takes place in the systems, and it ends when the entry has been done at the targeted point. In this way, the Google map has been implemented with different districts, and this is the vehicles when we can see on the map at our control room, which has been implemented in our district headquarters as well as the headquarters at state levels. So we are seeing that the green level which is running, when we can see everywhere that when we are just running the mouse at that truck, it will provide all the information with the SIO number, its speed, etc., etc. The yellow vehicle, what we are seeing, it is just like that. It has been under process, but at this point of time, it is just staying there. It is not running. And the red one, which has completed its job, and now at this moment, it is not under tracking, or it is not emitting the data. It is switched off. So in all this process, what we have implemented, that SMS information is being passed on to all the stakeholders at different levels. Because at different operation point, there are different stakeholders, just like our dealers, our MO, DSO, our district managers, district supply officers. So this is the matrix by which we used to send the SMS at different operational points to different recipients, so that the proper monitoring and proper implementations of this scheme can be done. Now, as soon as the system starts, there are different kinds of reports in this system, so that anyone in the systems who are the stakeholders can see the reports. Different kinds of reports are there, just like the allotment entry, the APS shop-wise payment status, our inventory status at the godowns, and transportation status. Some of the reports, what we can say, that consolidated allotment completion reports, because the reports are being entered at different levels, just like headquarter level for district entry, at district level for block entry, and at block level for the FPS-wise entry. So we can see here that how much entry has been done and where there is any lapses. If there is any entry which is not correct, or we can see at sitting headquarters in which blocks the entry has not, or allotment has not been made till date. This is FES shop-wise allotment report. Now we can see that how much dealers has made the payment, and accordingly how much SIO has been generated or has been made eligible, and district managers has not generated it, so that we can monitor and regulate it at which point of time and at which level the process has not in its full place. It is FES-wise of SIO status reports. It is the status when we can see that it has been dispatched or not dispatched. After generation of the SIO, the AGM has the responsibility to send the grains to the dealers, and when SIO in dispatch entry has been done, then the status automatically updates, and it shows that at what time it has been dispatched to the dealer's point of. In this model, we have entered transparency model. In the transparency model, we can check some services like download eChallan, API shop, comprehensive reports. That's right. What is this? eChallan, what has been generated and has been SMS to the dealer, concerned dealer. He can go anywhere for any point of time. Suppose his SMS has been deleted or he has not been delivered due to some or other reason, he may be outside the signal areas. He can find at any point of time that if he has the eChallan number, he will go to the any Vasda Kendra or cyber cafe and he can search from this eChallan numbers and find that what is his challan. If he is not aware about the eChallan number, he will search his district number, district name. From the district name, he will go to the block name, and in block name, he will go to the panchayat level, and in panchayat level, he will search his own name as FPS owner, and from that search, he can generate the eChallan. And he can print the eChallan. In fact, eChallan has already been generated, he can print the eChallan. Grievances status in some, we have implemented the call centers. At the call centers, different complaints are coming, and most of them are regarding the delivery or of the grains, or what amount he will get, or some gain is not. Sir. So this is the call center numbers on which our beneficiaries or any persons can complain. This grievances stations has also a portal on which a complainant can lodge its complaint directly on the system. Or one can see its grievance reports on its own on the internet and its website. This is the grievances reports. Thank you.
Very good. You can think a poor fellow for getting 5 kilos of anaj, how complicated the monitoring mechanism is. But I tell you one good thing, that it has made things very transparent and this model is very robust. Only thing is it has recently been introduced and it still has some teething problems. As we go along, things will, but I don't know when this is fully implemented, what our supply inspector, DSOs and those local brokers will do. Any question, please?
Thank you. Congratulations for such pioneering efforts. This is really great. I'm Indrajit. I'm at the University of Oxford and I work on circular migrants among other people. And my question has to do really with circular migrants. How can migrant workers, especially short duration migrant workers who leave their villages in search of casual employment, seasonal employment, etc., are there ways in which they can access their entitlements under the new PDS systems? Professor Sharma told us in the last session that there are about 20 crore such migrants, so that's about 20% of the population. What steps, if any, are taken to ensure their access? Thank you.
See, as per the Act, anybody, whoever is left out, if he is a migrant worker or if any deprived sections of the society, he has to be covered under the Act. So it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that nobody who is eligible as per the provisions of the Act is not left out. It is a continuous process. Anybody, even if he is not here for 2 years, he comes back, he must be covered as per the provisions of the Act, and it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that he is covered as per the provisions of the Act.
Ration card making, what we have done is, we have a census of 2011. So you have families and all those names. So that is the base of making ration cards for the people. So all those families which have been listed in census, and in fact we are going a little beyond. Even some families were left out during census, they are also being enumerated. And this is dynamic. We know that we will be able to make 95%, 90% ration cards, but 10% will be always, you have to have some mechanism to add those people. And that there is a provision for adding those people. Please.
Yeah, Shabalji asked me to introduce myself. I'm Karthik Muralidharan, Professor, University of California. So again, congratulations for all this work. So again, as somebody who's worked on PDS for some time, there are three sections of the problem, right? There is the procurement, then there is the movement of the grain from FCI to the dealer, and then there is the last mile from the dealer to the beneficiary. So all that this part of the EPDS, this cleanup that you have shown, fundamentally is a BSFC cleanup, right? I mean, in terms of getting it up to the dealer. But that last mile problem, my concern is, has actually become worse because you have dismantled the coupon system. So coupon system was running for the past 4 or 5 years. So that at least gave you a way of reconciling whether the beneficiary has given the coupon to the dealer, and there is a dealer reconciliation process. My understanding is the coupon system has been dismantled mainly because earlier the entitlement was at the household level. So you could print one coupon for BPL, one coupon for Antodaya. Now, because entitlement is at the individual level, you have done away with the coupon. So what is the system for reconciling that the dealer is actually giving the grain to the beneficiary as opposed to using his local power to sign that the grain has been given, but what is the way of monitoring that?
Yes, sir, I can. Karthik, I know that there are plus points about the coupon system. And if you go by the best practices, whether it is Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu or Andhra Pradesh, each system has its positive points and also the negative points. Definitely the coupon system has positive points. It has given the choice to the consumer at the ground level. If we have stopped that coupon system for the time being, as per the provisions of the Food Security Act, definitely the state government is fully aware of the nuances, and maybe the next step for the Bihar government will be a smart card or maybe a biometric kind of provision. And we are also thinking to link it with a Aadhaar-based kind of system. For the time being, I can't say, but definitely there will be a reform or there will be improvement at the cutting edge level, maybe by smart card or maybe by biometric system. Thank you.
So we'll move to the third presentation, which is last presentation. जो भी है. Again, Sanjay, he worked for a long time in health department and he was responsible for many initiatives in that sector. Right now he is dealing with the challenge that is, according to us, is our highest priority, first priority, that is a skill upgradation, a skill development activities.
To talk while I sit here. Chief Secretary, sir, Principal Secretary, Food and Civil Supplies, my colleague Vijay Lakshmi, distinguished academicians, ladies and gentlemen. It always is a privilege to be here, and I was telling Anjanji that it's a once-a-year pilgrimage for us. And perhaps if some kind of a system can be developed where people who are actually wanting to or trying to implement things and people who are in the ideas, who are in the realms of ideas, get together more often. I'm not making a presentation. I am going to say a few things. One thing which always catches my attention is innovation itself is something very interesting. Some things work, some things don't work. And I'm just going to give you an example which I came across some time back and I found it very interesting. And then I will cite a few examples while we were working in the health sector and something with which, as the Chief Secretary Sir said, we are grappling with as of now, how to skill 10 million people in Bihar in the next 5 years. But I would like to begin with a diversion. Just a few days back, the Global Innovation Index has been released. And I was reading India has slipped from 66th position to 76th. 10 points we have gone back. They have done a review of 143 countries on the basis of 82 parameters. And since I see Rathin here, I thought that he keeps writing about BRICS, so I thought I'll mention something about BRICS as to how the BRICS countries have fared in this innovation. Brazil has gone from 64 to 61st. Russia from 62 to 49. India 66 to 76. China 35 to 29. And South Africa from 58 to 53. So in the last also we were last in terms of innovation, and this time also we've done rather badly. We have slipped 10 points. In the first 20, all countries are high-income countries. And I think the only middle-income country which is there in the top is China, which is at 29th position. So someone is trying to make an argument that perhaps innovation is only for the high-income countries. But certainly it is a very fallacious and a fallacious idea. It cannot be true. Having said this, let me just give you an example which I find it is very interesting as to how some things work and sometimes things don't work. And many of us who are in the field, we do a pilot, and the moment we need to scale it up, we fail. So scalability of what we are trying to do always becomes an issue. In 1846, in a Boston hospital, there was a doctor, Dr. Bigelow. So one dentist came to him and he said that, look, I have discovered something, a gas, which given through an inhaler can make operations painless. And they said, let's try it. And they tried it, and they actually found that it works. And thus, this was the beginning of, this was the introduction of ether in trying to do operations. Within 7 months, this was October 1846, by June 1847, the idea had spread across the world. Everywhere, people were using ether. So it just took about 7 months for the idea to go global. At the same time, they also found out that 50% of the deaths after operations were taking place due to sepsis. So in 1864, one guy, Dr. Lister in Edinburgh, he somehow discovered that carbolic acid, if it is used in a particular manner, it brings down sepsis. And he started working on the idea of, wearing gloves, fumigating your equipment, sterilizing your equipment. And it took almost 50 years for this idea to diffuse. Even today, our doctors sometimes, we don't wash our hands before eating. And I've also seen during my long stay in the health department that many of the doctors still don't wash their hands while they're going for operations. So what is happening? Some ideas 7 months, some ideas 50 years. And the thing is that you innovate, and the moment it needs to diffuse, then sociology takes over. Diffusion is something which depends on the kind of society we are living in. But in this particular case, which I have just cited, people have argued that, when making an operation painless, it benefits the doctor. Because earlier you required 5 people to pin down that guy while doing operation. So to make it painless, the doctor was interested in this particular technology or this idea. The effects were visible, whether it is painful or not. But when you talk of germs, bacteria, viruses, it becomes an invisible thing. You actually don't see it. And a guy probably after being operated goes back home and dies after 15 days. So you're actually not seeing the problem, so it's an invisible issue. And somehow it never caught on. So people started asking, and people who are doing research in innovation, they said, how does it work? And one thing they have come out with is that if you want simple ideas to work, then you have to make repeated contact with people. That is, if a sales rep goes to a doctor and says that, look, this is a new medicine which has come in the market, would you like to use it? The doctor often will say, oh, I'm not interested. But then what he does is that he takes a load full of physician sample and he gives it to him, that you keep it anyway. Next day, he goes and meets him, and probably entices him, gives him some kind of an incentive. But then, in due course of time, he becomes a familiar guy. The doctor knows him by his face, he knows him by his name. And after that, you may ask, where is your son studying, where is your daughter studying, and eventually when you say that please use this drug, then the doctor is more susceptible to what is being suggested. This is what idea has come into the health sector also, that simple things don't work. Even today, exclusive breastfeeding doesn't work. I mean, it is so simple, and I think that, this is an idea which should catch everyone's attention. The moment the child is born, the child should be given mother's milk, and for 6 months, nothing but mother's milk. If you only do this, we will bring down our infant mortality rate by at least 1/3. But it doesn't happen. In Bihar, the figure is still 36% in spite of our best efforts. So what we worked towards was that let us empower our ANMs who are working in the field, the Ashas, and the Anganwadi workers. So as of now in Bihar, we have a health sub-center at 10,000 population. So at 10,000 population means 2 ANMs, 10 Anganwadi workers, and 10 Ashas. That means 22 women in that particular area. We decided to work with, Gates Foundation has signed a MOU with Government of Bihar, so we decided to work with them on this particular issue. And one of their grantees, BBC. So we said, let us create a health sub-center platform. And the health sub-center platform, every week, all these 22 women, they come and they just meet each other. So in due course of time, what happens is that all these 22 get to know each other by their names. They exchange their mobile numbers. They discuss their problems, personal and professional together, so they became friends. Then we introduced something which we called a mobile kunji. Now, a mobile kunji is nothing but it's an assortment of about 60 odd, it's a plastic sheet on which something is written, that exclusive breastfeeding and how antenatal checkup is to be done. So there's about 42 or 44 points on that particular. So each of these ashas, they have been given this kunji. And at the bottom of it, it has a short code, a 6-digit short code. So what happens is that if I go and tell a person in a village that don't give anything else other than mother's milk, chances are that she may not believe me. So what I will do is that I'll take out that mobile kunji, I'll see that short code, and I will dial it with my mobile phone. Then Dr. Anita would come on the line, and she will tell you how important it is for you to feed your child only mother's milk. If I say something, then probably it won't be taken very seriously, but if it is said in the voice of a doctor, usually people take it more seriously, so it's taken. And it has about 44 points. So this is one thing which we have introduced, and it is extremely successful, and I think it's a model which we are in the process of scaling it up to all the 38 districts, and it has caught the imagination of people across the country. So now Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, other countries also want to introduce it. While we were doing this, we also said that let this woman, Asha, ANM, and Anganwadi worker, let her also get an opportunity to test herself as to how much knowledge she has. So we have a concept called Mobile Academy. It has about 56 questions. So you can dial a number with your mobile phone, and it will say a question, and it will give you 4 options, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then through an interactive thing, either you press 1 for A, 2 for B, so you can do that. You need not do all the 56 questions at the same time. You can do 20 questions, and automatically the system will make a record of that. So the next time when you log on, you will begin from question number 21. The moment you finish doing the 56 questions, automatically it is recorded, a certificate gets printed, and we are requesting the civil surgeon or the district magistrate to call these women in one of a very simple function and distribute these certificates to them. It has worked rather well. Many of these women who have taken these tests and have not done well, many of them have said that, okay, I'm going to redo the test until I get 56 out of 56. So it has generated a fair amount of enthusiasm amongst these women. But the best part is that 22 women get to know each other, they know their names, they become family members, they have a mobile kunji with which they know how to share knowledge, and they also have a way of testing themselves. And this is one intervention which we have done. The second issue, and I must say that it has worked. It has worked. Our infant mortality rate, our maternal mortality rate, and all the sub-indices which go into all these things, by and large, they have fallen faster than the all India average. I may also be candid enough to say that our baseline was a little easier to do things from than what many of the other states may have had, but we have made marked improvement in this. The second issue which I would like to highlight and tell you is that as of now, one of my remit is to set up Bihar Skill Development Mission. We have done it, and the task which we have as of now is to give employable skills to 10 million people in the next 5 years. Working with 14 departments of the state. And I must say, this is my 24th year in the government. The hardest thing is when 2 government departments come together to work. When 14 departments come to work, you can well imagine what a mayhem it's going to create. But then the idea is to create some kind of a structure in which 14 departments come together while managing their own budgets to be able to skill together. And what we have done is, and this what we are experimenting is that it has not been done anywhere, but we are trying it out in the skill development mission. We have gone for a private public management unit because we would want to leverage the advantage which the private sector has and embed this private project management unit in the skill development mission. So there is a private entity which is working with the government entity in the Bihar Skill Development Mission. This system is also going to have district program management units in all the 38 districts, a centralized web portal on which anyone who wants to be trained, any VTP who wants to, vocational training provider who wants to provide training, everyone to come together. And after the course is over, have accreditation of the courses, give them certificates. I know it is going to be very challenging, and the reason why I am mentioning this to you is because we need help on this particular issue. We need help because this is something we are working in uncharted territory. As of now, in the government, often we look for precedents as to whether this has been done or not. Unfortunately, there is no precedence in this particular field. I may also add that as of now, I have the capacity to train about 1.5 lakh a year. I have to scale it up to 10 times. And the time period I have is 6 months. So in 6 months, how do you do this? This is the kind of a challenge you have. And I would want academicians, probably who've had experience of seeing the kind of skilling which takes place in Western Europe, because I think the European countries have done rather well in skilling. I may add it for your information that in Bihar, as of now, only 0.2% of people have had vocational training. All India is 2, and if you look at the Western European countries, it's almost 60 to 70%. So that is the kind of disparity we are looking at, but this is something which is extremely important for us, and the Chief Secretary also mentioned that this is one of the top priority of the government as to how do we skill people and give them employable skills. I'll be very happy to discuss the details with you, but we would require help from people who've had experience or who would want to come team up with us and take this exercise a little forward. The third issue, the third innovation which we have done, and I would welcome any of you who have time and who are in Patna, we have set up a skilled nursing center at Indira Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences. And we have in the state 21 A&M schools and 6 GNM schools. A&M is auxiliary nurse midwife and GNM is for staff nurse grade A. Since we have paucity of teachers, we thought that why not connect our schools through virtual interactive class. Have central lectures being done at one particular place and beam it to all the other institutions. And let students interact with each other. It's a two-way interactive process. So someone even if the lecture is being taken in Patna, with the help of mannequins, we can show how things are happening. And someone who's sitting in Samastipur can see it, can ask questions, and people can respond. In the first phase, we have integrated about 7 of our institutes. In the second phase, we will plan to do 8 more, and maybe in the due course of time, it will be scaled up. Our problem in the government is that many of us have become very risk averse, because the government punishes you very badly if you make mistakes. And that, I think, to a certain extent also is innovation, because many of us are either scared of the CBC, the CAG, the CBI, all kinds of things. Now, I think a certain amount of environment will have to be created in the government where people are willing to take risks. I am told that in the private sector, out of the 100% investment decisions which are made, 40% go haywire. Only 60% are on where you make profits. And yet, there is a certain, but that does not deter people from taking investment decisions just for the fact that you may go wrong. I think to a certain extent that one issue also needs to come into the government, but I think it's going to take a little time. The second issue which I would want to say, and I would share, because many a times in the government we are frustrated because how do you do things on a sustainable basis? I think one man's innovation is some other man's foolishness. So I start something which I say, this is very innovative, let's do it, and I get transferred out, my successor comes and he shuts it down. And sustainability of the scheme gets affected. It's a real issue. I'm really sorry the Chief Secretary sir has gone, because I really wanted to draw his attention towards it. That if at the government level, at the highest level of the government, if some things could be decided that these are some of the innovations which the state government is going to do. And if it is decided at the highest level, then even if the officers change, then things would continue either faster or quicker or slower, but at least they will not be put in the dustbin. So these are some of the random thoughts which I have as of now, which I would want to share with you. I would really be very happy if any of you would be interested and come to us for partnering in skill development mission, because this is something extremely important. And I think if you even look at it from the economy point of view, and I think if you look at it even at the union level or at the state level, I think the governments are very conscious of the fact that this is something which needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly. The only thing we do not have is the luxury of time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Chief Secretary, who was chairing the session, he had to leave for some urgent appointment. If there is any question or any comment on what Sanjay said, you're most welcome. Sanjay.
Yeah. Sanjay, again, thank you for a fantastic presentation. Well, on the skills thing, well, good luck. I know that in the UK, I was just talking to Jonathan, they did do something called Fresh Start. I don't know if this is good news or bad news for you, very similar to what you're trying, complete failure. And they had a metric, they had to reduce their unemployment benefit they were paying out. And so they started this Fresh Start thing, get people back into employment after recession. It didn't work. What Germany has done is very clunky, but it involves sort of a complete change in the pedagogy of education there. So, so these things are not viable for you. My instinct is, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, that the only way you can achieve this kind of volume result is to go for sort of low-end skilling in areas where employability is readily available and where you already have people from Bihar engaged, completely outside the state. The obvious answer is construction. There you will get the volume, it is quickly done, you have a tradition of construction workers, so you have the people ready to do low-end training. On the second point, I think I just want to reinforce this by talking about your own service, about innovation. And this is something I think that plagues us in India. And it also affects the private sector. I know this about the IAS because I'm on the project management on the PMC of your academy in Missouri. Now, part of the research we did, with district magistrate, we found something quite terrible happening. This award is given to the most innovative district magistrate, performance. Now, your service, over time, you're getting these guys from the IITs and IIMs, they know how to game systems. So they're doing something completely logical. District magistrates are picking one thing, health, childcare, each year, and they're doing it very well. trying to get the reward. And when they get the award and they move on, the next DM who comes picks something else. So the overall, in the quest for innovation here, the overall administration becomes uneven. And so in fact, we have recommended through this to DOPT that please reconsider this business of providing this, President's Award or whatever, Prime Minister's Award for the most innovative district achievement, because it is causing huge angularities in the system. So this problem with innovation we have is a structural one. The only way to change it would be what you're doing, I think, which we learn from, which is group. That is, innovation happens in groups, so you reward groups, not individuals, and you don't actually allow individuals to brand innovation. But you allow and encourage groups to brand innovation. So you don't create Steve Jobs, but you create Apple innovation. So the iPhone innovation is not a Steve Jobs thing, it's an Apple. So I think that's the direction forward. That's the only suggestion.
Well, we are even more risk averse than anybody else, right? So we'd never get into something like this. But what I wanted to say, I mean, the point that you raised about risk aversion is a very, very real issue. And when you compare other bureaucracies, particularly when you compare China, now, why is it that the Chinese party bureaucrat, there's a party bureaucrat, the party bureaucrat delivers in ways that the Indian bureaucrat doesn't deliver. Now, very clearly in the Chinese party bureaucracy, how you've performed in your earlier stint determines how fast you go ahead, right? Now, so there are two problems over here. One problem is the fact that the Chinese party bureaucracy begins in 1949 with the Chinese Communist Party. Not quite in 49, but once the revolution happens and you streamline the thing. So you don't have a colonial hangover. Ours is a system which has not shared what the system was set up to do something quite different. And it has never been able to move from that position of administration to delivering development. It gets caught between two stools. Now, I think this issue, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing to handle, given that we don't like wholesale changes, and we much prefer incremental changes. But it's an issue if we begin to think about. Now, suppose that award which has been given for best DM, suppose we change that to different metrics. Say, best performance in reducing female mortality, best performance in district growth overall. Now, these are random, but I'm saying that we could devise a common metric where we look at district performance overall. Now, the problem is, then you must also say that you're going to give somebody 5 years or 6 years, not transfer them out. But if we link that performance, look, it's a very, very bright set of people. They're a very smart set of people. And we do something which is quite amazing. We take some of the smartest people we have in the country, and by the mid-career, we have made them completely risk-averse. So I think if we are able to do something, and I think this requires a state-level conversation and it requires a national-level conversation. There are people over here who operate at both levels, and I'd urge all of you who operate at these levels to start pushing for something like this. And if we do it, I can guarantee the fact that people will stop gaming the system, people will look in terms of how development is delivered effectively. Thank you.
Just to share a thought on innovations. Actually, initially when we were discussing about making a presentation on innovations with Mr. Shaibal Gupta, I was mentioning that innovations are very important, and innovations are very necessary also. But at the same time, when it actually comes to the administration, more than innovations, the routine administration is very, very important. What is happening these days is that, there are so many schemes, which are implemented at the district level, that there are so many, programs, schemes and new schemes. Every year we are actually adding schemes, which are already there in the basket. So what is happening is that, whoever is interested in a particular sector, as you said rightly, that if somebody is interested in health, if somebody is interested in education or some other sector, they are just picking up one sector and focusing their energies on that, which is very good. But at the same time, maybe innovations are very important, or innovations are very much needed, maybe in science or other fields. But when it comes to administration, what I emphasize is that routine administration, doing our work, what is already given to us, systematically, thoroughly, and to the last bit, last point, is very, very important. What is happening today, especially in our state, we always crib that Bihar is still very backward and there are no systems in place and there is so much of stress at the higher level, and at the lower level people are not following systems, or not following procedures. That is basically because of lack of, emphasis on routine administration. For example, today, this revenue karmachari can, give rent receipt to anybody and everybody. But how dare he does that? The moment a revenue karmachari does that, he has to be immediately removed from the service. He cannot just give rent receipts to everybody. He has to give rent receipt according to the register too. So like that, there are so many examples in each and every sector of the administration. So it is very important that we focus on the routine administration, inspections, monitoring, supervision. These are very, very important issues.
I could not possibly agree more. In fact, you took the words out of my mouth. So the two things I was going to talk about was, the first is exactly this, right? I mean that, so one of my presentation today afternoon is going to be on quantifying the returns to investing in state capacity for better governance. You see, so everybody and their mother wants to throw programs onto the same kind of choke point of the one DM who has to administer 66 different programs. And so just structurally, this simply cannot work. So just to give you the example of governance and monitoring, what you were saying, we have just completed, we had done this All India study on teacher absenteeism back in 2003. And then in 2010, we went back and did a nationwide panel study of going back to the same villages. Now, the good news from a Bihar perspective is that the biggest contributor to reduction in All India teacher absence on a population-weighted basis comes from Bihar. So clearly, there has been a big improvement in that period from 2003 to 2010. But the larger point is exactly this. When you talk to teachers, when you talk to people, they'll say, oh, we don't have good buildings, working conditions, etc. But none of all of these improvements are correlated with reduction in absence. The only thing that matters is good old monitoring, right? I mean, has your school been visited by a superior officer in the past 2 months? And if you manage to do that consistently, that reduces the illegitimate absence by almost 45%. So anyway, so that is just a comment that the data supports everything that you just said. And I think my question was, in many ways, a variant of what Mrityunjay just asked, and it would be good to get the panel to reflect on this. See, I have worked now in many, many states, like over the past 10 or 12 years, and what you see is exactly this. There's no shortage of collector-level innovations, no shortage of local micro-innovations, but there is no institutionalized way of capturing these innovations, and many of them are sensible, many of them are not so good. But as an administrator, or as an academic, one place where academics can perhaps think of systematic frameworks is sort of like what Mrityunjay was saying, but thinking about how do you devise data-driven ways of learning from all these micro-pilots and micro-innovations to come back and help scale up. So that's what I think we're trying to do in a bunch of sectors in our partnerships with the government. So any thoughts on how we might do more of this would be great.
On innovation. If state head promotes, it can become national issue, and even national also, the national level, it can become a model. Because in one issue, that is employment generation for handicaps and old age people and women, that is those who are not capable to undertake this earthwork. For them, I have devised one innovative technology in social forestry in 2007-8. So when it came to the notice of our Honorable ex-CM in Vikas Yatra, and he has posted me as a divisional commissioner in Tirhut, and he has promoted me to translate that concept into the field. And that could able to achieve in one day 1 crore plantations I could able to plant in 6 districts in about 7,500 villages by pressing about 3 lakh people. And today, after intensive evaluation by the national LBSNA Mussoorie and Ministry of Rural Development, ultimately they have developed that as a national model, and it has been translated to the whole country. And now on the same concept, the present Minister for Rural Development, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, he has given the statement that they wanted to take up 200 crore plantation in all along the national highway and other roads. So the point what I want to say is, if such innovative ideas flash to the state head, so state head can change the entire, the system. So that's what I wanted to say. But that is also true what Mr. Sanjay sir has said, that if one officer brings about some changes by innovative idea, the next successor try to always thinks that innovative idea is absolutely, non-innovative idea. But however, if it comes to the knowledge of the stated, definitely it can, become a really the good this thing. Thank you.
I usually don't speak. I usually don't speak at these things because I'm one of the organizers. But I wanted to share with this panel my experience of a couple of things. When we were planning out this conference, we wanted one session like the one we are having, and another session would be from outside the state, right? So to a limited extent, we succeeded. But in trying to locate one particular person, I was talking to him in Bangalore. You see, the idea was that in Bihar, you're soon going to need an international airport. That has to be constructed. Where, I don't know, but the Patna airport as it stands is not working. So I talked to the guy who had built up or helped build up the Bangalore International Airport. He is from your service, Mr. K. Jairaj. He was the additional Chief Secretary of Karnataka. So he's retired now and is into various things. And the first thing he said, oh, Bihar has excellent practices. And the ones that we have adopted. And the first thing he mentioned was the right to public service. That has not only been adopted in Karnataka. I wish Anjani ji was here. And then he went on. He was supposed to come, but then he fell ill. So essentially, he could not make it. So the work that you do is recognized not only, maybe not as much inside the state as it is recognized outside. But I thought I should pass this on. The second thing is we too have a problem when people get changed. I think many researchers are sitting here, and things that were approved as interesting projects and they were working on, when people get changed, then the next person. So we know this problem. So I think there is some way, if we can think of doing something about it, it would help. So I don't know how to do about, obviously I don't expect a solution, but I want to flag that item. The second, I am still not done. Since I've got the microphone, I want to hang on to it for some more time. The other thing that I want to say is about Sanjay's excellent presentation about innovation and skill formation is what I meant. I wonder whether all of you were here when Professor Joe Stiglitz gave this ADRI Foundation lecture. Now, one of the things that I found out, because I had to do the introduction of Stiglitz, was Stiglitz's schooling. It turns out he comes from the area which apparently produced one other Nobel laureate, and that was Paul Samuelson. Not only that, when he was in school, they were forced to take up at least one of 3 trades. And Stiglitz learned how to be an electrician. That was his specialty. So I think one thing, if you are going to be trying for skill formation of some kind, this is not something which is going to help you achieve this enormous target. But what one could try is adopt this business of starting with skill, learning some trade in school, one of 3. And then everyone in every school is forced to take it up. I think it's a damn good idea. And Stiglitz says that any bulb he can change in a second. Of course, it's probably a waste of a time to have a Nobel laureate change bulbs, but he need not have been a Nobel laureate. I think that's all.
Hello? No, I don't want to discuss about the innovation. You know, innovation is a much more complicated thing, but I agree with your contention that in a particular department, when somebody gets changed, the successor normally don't take up, continue that innovation. But I have a more problematic thing related to the skill development. Now, we have one center, Jan Shikshan Sansthan, which is supposed to do skill development program. Now, when we got that center from National Literacy Mission, so we were told that the best JSS are functioning from Coimbatore, from Bombay, from Delhi. So I asked my director who was appointed that you travel to those places and to travel to those places also where the economy is not developed, which are normally the backward economy, yet JSS is successful. Now he traveled in Madhya Pradesh, he traveled in Uttar Pradesh, and in travel in other places also, in Chhattisgarh and other places. He couldn't find any successful JSS functioning in those places, which are supposed to be the dedicated skill development centers. Now, in contrast to that, for example, in Coimbatore, the JSS is a very, very popular center, and thousands of persons are being trained, and several companies have already lined up to take them into their industry. Now, one problem that I feel that at the low level of skill development, until unless you have a domestic market to incorporate them, I think that is going to be a big problem. Because at the low level of skill development, they will not go automatically to the national market. For example, if you are preparing somebody for engineering or medical, they have a national market. But at a low level of skill development, that is a major problem. At the same time in Patna, suppose you want a very good electrician to do something in your household, you will not get. He will say that I will come after 2 days. If you want a plumber, a good plumber, it is normally connected with a particular subnational group in Patna. Now you will not get them. at one end, you don't have a very good skill, low-level workers, but at the same time, you don't get very good numbers who want to get trained in the skill development. So that is the major problem that one has to see. And this has been our experience with Jan Sikh Sansthan, which is being promoted by National Literacy Mission.
This is for Mr. Sanjay Kumar about your skill development mission. Have you any plans to link it with institutions, colleges? Since I work in a college, employability is a big issue there. So have you any plans of doing that? Secondly, what kind of skills and trades are you thinking of, developing or promoting? Because I agree with what Shehbalji has to say, that low-skilled people, if we want good ones, we don't get them. Interestingly, in SFC, we are trying to employ people, and it's not been a very easy task to get people who can even type very well in English, or even, IT people. It's not been difficult. It's being difficult. So my feeling is that you need to have skills, low-level skills, say for the local market, but you need to skill our students for the national market, the global market also. So what kind of skills do you think of promoting, and do you plan any linkages with the college? And thirdly, about risk avoiders in our profession, we have very strange developments. Either there are a whole lot of risk takers who take the college and the project into problems, or we are becoming performance avoiders. Because if you perform well and your performance is recognized and you have other assignments, well, you're not liked. So there are a whole lot of issues there. So about the skill development.
Are you suggesting that the universities would want to come and partner with the skill development mission?
Speak for the university. I work in a college where I'm a placement coordinator. And I have this big issue because some of our outstanding students academically are not employed because they lack certain skills. So I'm really not suggesting anything, but I'm wanting to know whether...
No, because I see a great role for the universities to come up and to partner with various departments of the government. For instance, if you look at the health sector, if you see the African scenario, most of the people who are actually involved in imparting training to health workers are from the universities. And unfortunately in India, none of the universities are interested in providing healthcare training. We have created specialized institutions like National Institute of Health and Family Welfare, State Institute of Health and Family Welfare, but universities which actually are there. So I foresee greater possibility for partnering between the university and the government. Long back, I read that policy making in government has become research neutral. So, and another friend of ours was also saying that data-driven, data should actually go into making policy. So I think I see a greater role for the universities, that is one. In Bihar, of course, as Shehbalji was saying, if you're looking for a plumber in Patna, chances are you'll find a Odia plumber. You will not find a guy from Bihar wanting to become a plumber because there are sociological issues of purity and pollution which come into the mind. People don't want to become a plumber because you have to go into the toilet, you have to work there, you'll come in contact with water. Our guys would be happy to become a data entry operator or a security officer, because there you can have a gun or a stick and then you can pass orders. It goes with your worldview. But if you're asked to become an electrician or become a fitter or so many other professions, you are not inclined actually. Maybe, I mean, in due course of time, if money were to improve the amount of money you would earn, then probably people would come in. You know, you'll be amazed to know that we don't have marine welders. Someone was mentioning to me today that in most of these places where shipbuilding yards in Gujarat, Chinese welders are coming in by plane loads. And they go there and they do underwater welding. They make a lot of money and then they go back. So one issue, of course, we are looking at is that recognition of prior learning. You know, in Chennai, the entire welding for the metro has been done by local welders. But if those guys were to go to Bombay and ask for a job there, they will not get a job because they don't have a certificate. So can we pick up these people and as a part of recognition of prior learning, accredit them, give them some kind of a certificate that you are a welder, you are a fitter. You'll be surprised to know, I was surprised to know that Bihar sends 84,000 people to foreign countries to work. Fourth largest after Uttar Pradesh, Kerala and Andhra Pradesh. Bihar is the fourth largest state sending people. What are these people doing there? None of them are even having a small certificate which certifies that they are tailors, they are welders, or they are whatever profession they belong. So the idea is to be able to get these people and give them some kind of a certificate which gives them portability, because we need portability. Someone was mentioning that if you have a PDS entitlement in some panchayat in Bihar and then you go to Karnataka, do you take your PDS portability along with you? If you were to go there, if you were to do that, then, and technology I think today makes it possible. So lots of things, but let me also tell you that we are baffled by challenges. We are at still at 88% rural society. 88% of Bihar is still in rural areas. And you know that diversification for skills in a rural area is much less than urban area. Ultimately, diversification for skills comes when you start living in an urban area where there is more division of labor. So with 88% people, what kind of a training do you give them? Do you all give them training in agriculture, where ideally anyone who's looking at the system, we would want to see that how do I transport 30% people who are in the rural areas to urban areas in the next 5 years to see greater urbanization. So there are lots of issues, and I also agree with the fact that we need to do a skill gap analysis, see what the local market is going to absorb, the kind of jobs which are going to become available. Of course, people will also go to outside the state, outside the country. But then if all the states were to start, they are embarking on skilling thing, if everyone were to start doing skilling, then our availability and our opportunity in other states is also going to decrease. We need to factor that also when we are making these programs.
We had a good discussion on this issue of skill development as also on innovation. Good things must continue, but we have to break for lunch. And some of us can discuss at the time of lunch on the issues we are interested in. And